After the abysmal first season of Amazon's The Rings of Power, I felt like I deserved to feel a little happiness since I had felt none watching the show. I felt like the only thing I could do to reverse the damage that this billion-dollar tragic mess of a show did to my psyche was to watch the entire Peter Jackson trilogy and behind-the-scenes footage from the making of those films. On this particular watch-through, however, I wanted to pay close attention to a topic I've been interested in exploring recently, the topic of death in film. I plan on making a video talking about death and cinema in the near future, but in order to do that, I needed to look at some of the best and worst death sequences in film history, and it just so happens that The Lord of the Rings tends to make the list of best deaths quite frequently. But in my opinion, upon further analysis, there is practically no wasted death scene in the entire trilogy. This video is mainly about the Peter Jackson trilogy, but by analyzing this aspect of writing, we can also see how the Rings of Power writers have failed in similar scenes. As I dive deeper into how death plays a role in cinema, I'm realizing more and more that death can serve many different purposes in a film, and I may want to break down how it can affect the viewer. I figured that a great way to start would be to explore the deaths within just the Lord of the Rings original trilogy, and rank them based on some of their distinct qualities. Many of these scenes could have actually been in multiple different categories, and I tried my best to at least mention most of the major death scenes in the films, but if I missed anything, please let me know. There are obviously spoilers ahead, but come on, you haven't seen The Lord of the Rings yet? Go ahead, go watch it and come back. I'll see you in like 63 hours. At number 5, we have death scenes that tell the audience something about the person who is dying or the world that they live in. These scenes don't necessarily follow a very strict formula. The most important thing is that at the moment of death, that character does something to show their true character one last time. This can be a sad, dramatic scene, or a highly intense, violent one like my honorable mention for this category, which is the death of Lurtz, the Uruk-hai, who very clearly doesn't care about himself and is only concerned with killing. But my number one pick for this category is actually the death of Haldir. Haldir's death may seem somewhat overdone. I mean, we only really met him once before in the film, and we actually don't know anything about him other than the fact that he came to help at Helm's Deep when no one else would. But what makes this scene work is how they let us experience death from Haldir's perspective. Elves in Middle-earth are immortal, so death to them is not ordinarily dealt with. Haldir himself is thousands of years old, and as he is struck for a second time, and as his body begins to fade, all he can see are the strewn bodies of his comrades. He looks confused as he tries to make sense of what's happening, but dying is unfamiliar to him, and as he takes his last breath, he's surrounded by nothing but death. The purpose of the scene is subtle. Like I said before, we aren't meant to be emotionally attached to Haldir, as we've only really met him once before in the film, but his death tells a much more tragic story than on the surface. Elves are immortal and seldom experience death, which is in strong contrast to the race of men. I tend to think of elves dying as if a 1,000-year-old tree were cut down. It's just not really something that should happen. Men have to deal with the harsh reality of death all the time, and so are much more accustomed to it, whereas elves dying is a completely abstract concept and extremely unfamiliar to them, as they have little experience with it. We see Haldir's face go from confusion to a very subtle look of curiosity as he tries to make sense of what he's feeling. This scene with Haldir is not the most heartbreaking or epic. However, as a result of his death, we understand more about the world that the story takes place in. Next, at number 4, we have death scenes that made us cheer. These are the most deserved deaths, the comeuppance for the bad guy, a taste of their own medicine. Whether at the hands of the heroes or due to their own self-destruction, these are those deaths that we yearned for. This is the brutal death of Saruman in Isengard by his own right-hand man, or the slaying of the Witch King of Angmar by the single most badass female character in all film history. We can totally argue about that. But in my opinion, there is no death that I cheered for as loudly as the steward himself, Denethor.
You will not take my son from me! Surpasses Denethor, son of Ectheliel.
I think the main reason this death is so satisfying is that out of the many people to die in this trilogy, Denethor was the only person I was really truly disgusted with. Poisoned by his greed for power and the pain of the death of his favorite son, sorry Faramir, Denethor appears to be everything wrong with the world of men. He is selfish, weak, vain, narcissistic, and, quite frankly, fucking insane. In the films, we see Saruman only ever do evil things, and while we know the Witch King was also once human, we also only ever see him do evil things. On the other hand, we get to see Denethor experience happiness and true joy when Boromir is around, which makes how he treats Faramir so much more painful to watch. We see him ignore Gandalf's counsel, obsess over the power of the ring, and hide from the battle as he sends his last remaining heir to his death while he stuffs his face. Then we see him indulge in his own fantasy of heroic self-sacrifice while his city is destroyed. It's these contrasting characteristics of being a truly flawed human being that make Denethor such a compelling yet hateable character. After knowingly sending his second son and only living heir to his death, Denethor sees a very wounded yet still living Faramir and decides the next logical step is to kill himself and Faramir by burning themselves alive.
Why would you do that?
As Denethor prepares to light the funeral pyre, Gandalf and Pippin burst into the hall to try to save Faramir.
Bury this madness!
You may triumph in the field of battle for a day, but against the power that is risen in the east, there is no victory.
Will not take my son from me!
As Denethor lays burning, he sees the eyes of his son flutter open and realizes his mistake. In one last moment of panicked insanity, Denethor, still on fire, runs out of the building and jumps from the top of Minas Tirith to his death. I know that this one feels a bit unrealistic. He did pretty much run a half mile to jump, but symbolically, Denethor's life has been going down in flames pretty much since we met him in the beginning of the film. Watching him fall in a very ungraceful way from power to his final resting spot among the common people of Minas Tirith felt like a total win overall. John Nobles did an incredible job at portraying a mad king, and did an absolute bang-on job of making me dislike him. Fantastic job, sir.
Disgusting!
Coming in at number 3, we have the death fake-out scene.
I know! I'll fake my own death!
Now, this may be a bit of a controversial opinion since none of these scenes actually include someone dying, but I felt like it was important to include them because they are so important for the emotional momentum of the story. These are moments like Aragorn falling off of a cliff, Faramir falling in battle, or Arwen dying in the Palantir vision. But for my money, there isn't a better death fake-out scene than the one, the only, Gandalf the Grey.
Fly, you fools!
I actually had a bit of trouble deciding whether or not it was fair to use this as an example of a fake death scene, because ultimately Gandalf does die, or something like that. However, he's born pretty much the same person, just a little cleaner, so I wasn't really sure. I could have chosen the scene for other categories, but I felt like it was important to distinguish death fake-outs from actual deaths in film, because that has a profound effect on the viewer's emotions. Gandalf, the leader of the group and by far the most powerful, seemingly having just defeated the Balrog and brought the Fellowship safely out of the mines, kinda gets a little cocky. He turns around too early and gets caught not paying attention. It's an incredibly crucial mistake that costs the Fellowship a great deal. There are many things that make this scene so damn good, but the Fellowship's reaction to Gandalf dying is easily some of the best acting in the entire trilogy, and with their reactions, we see what Gandalf's death really meant to each of them. First, the bone-chilling, slow-motion scream from Frodo as he watches Gandalf fall, and the stunned reactions of the rest of the Fellowship as they escape the mine. After making it out of the mine, Gimli is pissed. His rage is just too much for him to handle, and he just wants to fight. Boromir is torn between his urge to fight and his intuition to save the remaining members of the Fellowship. Merry is trying to console an inconsolable Pippin, who at this moment feels like his actions in the tomb were ultimately what caused Gandalf to die. Sam's adrenaline finally wears off and he slumps over dejectedly as his fear turns to heartache. Legolas here is experiencing the death of someone close to him, possibly for the first time. It's really confusing and he doesn't know how to react. He fights against emotions that elves probably never have to feel, and he has likely never felt grief before this moment. Aragorn, knowing how significant a loss they just took, tries his best to keep a brave face as the new leader of the Fellowship and move on so they don't lose anyone else. And then, Frodo. Need I say any more? This look, filled with total loss and sadness, but also guilt and survivor's guilt. It's the look of pain, of wishing you could turn back the clock, but knowing you can't. My God, it's perfect. Now, the fact is, they're all mourning someone that isn't actually dead yet, but they don't know that, and neither does the audience. So, while this is a sort of fake death moment, the audience and the rest of the Fellowship truly believe Gandalf is gone. I plan on discussing the scene a lot more in my video about death in cinema, because there's a lot more to be said about the consequences of Gandalf's death, or rather the fact that he actually comes back to life afterwards. The reactions to Gandalf falling are what makes the scene so sad, but the death of Gandalf was much more than just a sad moment. It completely altered the trajectory of the story, requiring the Fellowship to change their approach altogether. Moving forward, the Fellowship will never be as strong as they were when they were all together, and Gandalf's death marks the first crack in the Fellowship and starts them on a path to separation. This brings me to my number 2 pick, deaths that fulfill the plot. These are the deaths that happen right at the most climactic moment in the story, the deaths that are necessary for the plot to wrap up, and usually some of the more emotionally weighted scenes as well. Throughout the trilogy, the theme of fulfilling what you're meant to do is pretty front and central. Frodo is meant to take the ring to Mordor, Gandalf is meant to return to Middle-earth, and Aragorn is meant to accept his true calling as king. I'm picking a couple of examples from outside of The Lord of the Rings, since the plot can only wrap up once a story, but moments like Killmonger dying in Black Panther, or Tony Stark from Endgame are great examples of this kind of death. In the case of The Lord of the Rings, the obvious choice for my number 2 pick is Gollum and the Ring. I'm tying Gollum and the ring together as one because the death of Gollum and the death of the ring are intertwined. Gollum needed to be part of the story the same way the ring did, and in the end, Gollum and the ring's fate are the same. At this point in the film, Frodo is about to throw the ring into Mount Doom and destroy it forever, but the power of the ring is too strong, and it takes Frodo. Sauron knew this would happen. In fact, he counted on it. But what Sauron didn't foresee was the ring was so powerful that someone would actually be willing to sacrifice themselves just to spend another few seconds with it. The ring, doing what it does best, rests on the surface of the lava, betraying its bearer and leaving him to die just like it has always done. Then of course we get the scenes of Sam trying to save Frodo, and we see the pain Frodo has felt the entire film as he thinks about letting go and dying with the ring. The ring was still holding on as though it were waiting for Frodo to fall, and it's only when Sam finally grabs onto Frodo that the ring is destroyed. It was a beautiful moment, and anyone who has ever had a difficult time in life can relate to that. Sometimes we just want to let go, but some people, the real-life Samwise Gamgees, will always be there for us, and we can always trust them to reach their hands out and help us from the most difficult of times. This moment is obviously the climax of the film, but what makes it so impactful is much more subtle than that. Sure, the ring is gone now, and the goal of the Fellowship has been fulfilled, but through Gollum's death, we see the true power the ring has over its bearer. It helps us understand the true impact the ring has on people, how even the strongest characters like Frodo can and will be taken by the power of the ring. It tells us as an audience how fragile this journey really was, and how just one slip-up, one wrong hand had touched that ring, and it would have all been over. This scene also marks the beginning of the, admittedly, very long ending of the film. It's the scene that allows for all of our characters to finally begin their journey of healing, which, for some, will never fully happen. This is an incredibly impactful scene not only to the plot, but also to our emotions, and it absolutely could have taken my number one spot if it weren't for my pick for the most emotional death scene in the entire film. Okay, here we go. Many death scenes in this trilogy were emotional. Gollum, Gandalf, and Theoden all had death scenes that tugged at people's heartstrings, but I'll be damned if there isn't a more gut-wrenchingly sad scene than the death of Boromir.
They took the little ones. Frodo. Where is Frodo?
I let Frodo go.
I tried to take the ring from him. I did not see. I have failed you all.
No, Boromir. You fought bravely. You've kept your honor.
The world of men will fall, and all will come to darkness, and my city to ruin.
But I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Nor our people fail.
Our people. Our people. I would have followed you, my brother. My captain. My king.
Tolkien leans hard into the theme of gallantry in these stories. Many times in the films we get to see characters acting heroically even in the face of certain death, like during the Ride of the Rohirrim. But there is something about watching a man fight past the point that should be possible that pulls at something deep within my emotional core.
So brave.
Everything about this scene is perfect because it shows redemption and courage and heroism. It's so incredibly powerful to see someone make the ultimate sacrifice for the good of others. Mortally wounded Boromir's first thoughts aren't concern or worry about his injuries, but with the hobbits and their safety. Then he admits that he tried to take the ring from Frodo, which to Boromir means he is weak, and as his strength leaves him, so does his faith for the future of Middle-earth and the people of Gondor. Boromir's entire character up until this point was about his strength and honor, and to him, that has failed. But Aragorn tells him, "You have kept your honor, not you have regained your honor," meaning, to Boromir, he never really lost it.
I would
He showed Aragorn the same affection that he had shown for Faramir by calling him his brother. He yielded to Aragorn his own rank and title of captain, and he repented for his disgraceful words at the council in Rivendell by calling Aragorn my king. Boromir's last act in Middle-earth was to swear fealty to the true king of Gondor, restoring his faith in his people and also Aragorn's faith in himself as a leader. Here's the bottom line. The reason these scenes are so good can be boiled down to two things. Either we care about the character, or we care about the impact on the plot once that character dies. Every one of these moments either teaches us something about the world we're in, or the characters that we care about. And it's because of those reasons that this film stands up to all others, even now. From minor side characters to members of the Fellowship, there is no death in this trilogy that is out of place. Everything fits perfectly within the story and within the characters. And that's why I think that there are no bad death scenes in the entire Lord of the Rings. This is how I figured I would rank these scenes, but let me know what you think. Which is your favorite or least favorite death scene from the Lord of the Rings? And what moments of those stood out most to you?
Ready?
Hey everyone, it's Max Soto here. I just wanted to say, if you've made it all the way to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. Drop a like and comment if you have anything to say. I may have made a mistake inevitably in this video. If I have, please point it out in the comments nicely, of course, or however you want to. I guess it doesn't really matter. I'll see it anyway. But yeah, this took me a long time to make, and I hope y'all enjoyed it, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you so much.